Lit.
Giving go my soul.
The revolution is lit.
Uhuru comrades, and welcome to today's Omali Taught Me Sunday study featuring Chairman Omali Yeshitela. My name is Akile Anai, Director of Agitation and Propaganda for the African People's Socialist Party, as well as your MC for this morning. These studies are so important, and we encourage you right now to invite your friends and family to it. This week, Chairman Omali Yeshitela reads from the political report to the 2017 plenary of the African People's Socialist Party titled Putting Revolution Back on the Agenda. We will be discussing what a liberated Africa will look like and the African Socialist Workers' State. He starts on page 41, the second full paragraph. Although the African Revolution of the 1960s was defeated, for the first hour, the chairman will review the study materials, and in the second hour, we will open it up to you, our live viewers, to ask your questions. It's my honor now to introduce our leadership, the leader of the African nation and the worldwide African Revolution, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. You're heard, Chairman.
Uhuru, thank you so much, Comrade Director Akile, for that introduction. I'd like to really appreciate all of your comrades, party members, Uhuru forces, and others who have joined this discussion on today. It's, I think, a really important discussion. But first of all, what I would like to do is to acknowledge today in the United States has been declared a Mother's Day. And it's not something that we have paid that much attention to in some ways, because sometimes we detest these holidays put forth by the colonizers, because we know that the purpose of these holidays is to really consolidate what the oppressor European colonial nation and national identity. But the truth is that we cannot allow the colonizer to define for us the whole concept and definition of motherhood and the significance of mothers in society. We have to recognize that this is a $25 billion industry, by the way, that this whole issue of Mother's Day, that's what it has become, despite ever the intentions of the originators, the white women who initiated the struggle for Mother's Day inside the United States, that it has become a $25 billion industry. And that was to the dismay of at least one of the white women who fought for and to create this Mother's Day. The other thing I want to say is that while today has been determined as nationally recognized observance of mothers in the United States. The United States, of course, is not the only place where the concept of motherhood has been recognized to be significant. That's all over the world. There's no place, I imagine, on earth where the attention has not been given to the significance of motherhood. But I want to just say something about that briefly, just in terms of Africans and this whole question of motherhood. I mean, we recognize that, first of all, that Africa itself is the mother of humanity and human civilization. And the same is true of African women. We recognize that the first human being on the planet Earth was born to an African woman. And even European colonial scientists declare that they have actually identified this person through DNA investigations and things like that. And for us, that's something special and something significant, or it should be. I think traditionally it has been. I mean, we come from, as African people, generally speaking, matrilineal societies that recognize the power and the significance of women. And I don't think it's an accident that just on May 25th, which, by the way, is of 2020, which was the anniversary of the so-called African Liberation Day, that the 46-year-old man killed, brutally murdered, seen by millions of people globally, who, as he's dying, calls for his mother. I haven't seen or heard anybody, none of these, self-defined, self-described, macho, tough guys. I've heard nobody ridicule the fact that he called for his mother. It's a statement of the significance and reality that women and mothers have had in our lives. And I think that it's something that we can recognize, but we can treat it differently than how it's been treated by the colonizer, because we know the trauma that African women have gone through, where a whole continent of Africa, the whole nation of our people was created, was transformed into a place for just creating human beings that would be sold on the market. And women African women expected to bear children that would be servants to this system that we live under and are dominated by today. And how what should have been and historically has been like a joyous occasion, motherhood, turned into a real trauma. Because in places like Sierra Leone and West Africa, 1 out of every 8 African women would die in childbirth. Trauma because we, in many instances, were forced by our white colonial oppressors, women forced to give birth so that because it represented a part of the wealth of the white colonizer to have this African child born to it, forced because of just the brutality that's been experienced by women, African women, because women were the bearers and have been the bearers of this capacity to produce wealth for the colonial capitalist system through giving birth and losing children on a regular basis, children taken after being born, like people take pups from dogs and give them away and things like that. That's what African women have had to experience and suffer, even while putting up fierce resistance, making struggle. And make no mistake about it, there's not been an instance where African women were not involved in revolutionary struggle, even if we didn't know their names, like Harriet Tubman or like a Nat Turner. But the women we remember were cooking for the presumed owner of human beings, and would I'm told, even crush glass and put in their meals, and to kill the slave master, to kill the dastardly, beastly, inhuman force that were presumed to own us and own our children and things like that. So African women have also taken to the battlefield. and fought, with arms. So women have always been there, even though because of the nature of the society that has colonized us, presupposed that women were this inferior person, transformed, at least in the imagination of the colonizer, into something that has been created inside Europe in terms of relationship between men and women, where women were, little more than house pets or treated in that fashion. So there was this presumed total and absolute ownership of women, and this is something that has been that permeates the society that we grew we became a part of as a consequence of colonialism. So I'm just saying that we should hold up African women high, and not as some one who, the traditional nationalist assumptions that, the culture is here and the history is here, and she's going to teach the children and raise the children, do such and such, but as really real, genuine, at minimum, equal partners in the struggle to overturn this social system and to raise the significance of African women in our history, in our development, and in our struggle. So I just wanted to say that. So it's within this context, and I think we should develop our own ceremonies and of appreciation for African women. From time to time, we've done this in the African People's Socialist Party. We've held events on this day to raise high the historic and heroic role of African women and African mothers. And so, so for us, it's really important to say that African women, mother of human life, human and civilization on the planet Earth, African women, mother of the African Revolution. So for us, that's the Mother's Day that we are talking about. This is something I think that we should extol, and we should make sure, I think we should participate. And I'm saying this to members of the party and Uhuru movement, that we should do Mother's Day events that give a meaningful definition to what the African mother is and what the African mother, like African people in general, have to do and have to be to overturn our oppression as an enslaved and colonized people. So I wanted to say that. I also just wanted to say that over the weekend, I had the pleasure of participating in two important webinars, or at least watching them. And one was done by the JOKO Collective, that's J-O-K-O Collective. JOKO Collective is a recent addition to the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace and Reparations. It, I think, became something like the 18th organization that's a part of this coalition. And they did a really interesting webinar on African Black economics. I don't remember how it was characterized, whether it was African or Black or something to that effect. But I think that I know that there were people who presented there who did understand that we had to be talking about African economics. And I thought it was really important because some really smart and knowledgeable people participated in that. I think that this discussion we're going to have today will reflect, will speak to the issues that were being struggled with by this webinar. I think that we will, and I will try perhaps upon getting to places in this discussion on today to point out some things that I think really significant and that could have contributed to how that discussion happened around economic development, economics and African economics, and how it must be addressed. And then the other thing I watched was part of was a discussion that was done by an organization, a coalition that calls itself UNAC. It calls itself United National Anti-War Coalition, and describes itself as the largest anti-war coalition in the United States. And they did a webinar on Colombia, Colombia is experiencing serious kind of crisis right now since April 28th, where the people went out on strike. And Colombia is something like a quarter of the population in Colombia African. And a lot of these people have been gunned down, killed by the Colombian government, which is a notoriously reactionary government that functions as an instrument of US policy in the Americas, one of its weapons in the Americas. So that was interesting to discuss. And you know, but as we were talking about Colombia, there's no way you can talk about Colombia without talking about Haiti, where, you know, there's been fierce struggle in the streets of Haiti now for months. And much of this goes unreported in bourgeois media. And then, of course, in Brazil, where just the other day, the police killed something like 25 Africans, and where there's a history, an ongoing war that's being made against Africans there, even though it's a majority African state, neo-colonial state, and that makes war, especially against children who are homeless and living on the streets and things like that because of the nature of this colonial capitalist economy there. And so those struggles are happening, and the resistance is growing throughout the world. I mean, Africans are fighting, actually engaged in struggle globally. Everywhere you look in the world, that's happening. Even in places that the imperialists have considered to be stable and representative of the kind of government they want. Places even like Senegal. And of course, we know that Spain is catching hell in the so-called Sahel, in Chad, and other places in that arena. And then in this country, the United States, ongoing resistance by African people that's forcing them to have discussions unlike anything they thought they'd have to deal with in this era, despite the fact that there is still struggle to define what this is going to look like. There's just struggle happening by African people throughout the world. And in Jamaica, just you can't find a place. And it's such a fundamental development right now where this is happening, that how that looks and the leadership that we give it is going to be extremely important. And that gives a real significance to this discussion that we're going to be having today. So I just wanted to open it up, mentioning some of those things, and hopefully I'll get an opportunity, or you'll get an opportunity to comment on some of that as we move this study forward. So I'm starting here on what would be page 41 in the text, the political report to the African People's Socialist Party 2017 plenary. And again, it's really important to remember that this is a report from the party. This is a plenary report. This is a report from the party that comes from the Congress, the 6th Congress of our party. It's part of the whole history of resistance struggle, tactics and strategies that have been developed, and the political theory that has been developed over many, many, many years of actually engaged in struggle, not something that was created by a professor in a classroom, but the classroom has been the struggles and histories of our people engaged in this fight for a liberation against the capitalist colonial capitalist social system that came into existence through the capitalist colonialist slave trade and the colonization of peoples around the world. So I'm now I'm beginning on the third full paragraph from the top of the page. So although the African Revolution of the 1960s was defeated, our party has never stopped fighting. We provided leadership after the mass arrests that followed the assassinations of Che Guevara, Patrice Lumumba, Fred Hampton, Lawrence Mann of the African People's Socialist Party, Malcolm X, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We participate in the political struggles of today, not as newcomers, but as the leaders who have brought our people this far during the most difficult of times as the party that is determined to put revolution back on the agenda as the only solution to the bitter conditions Africans and other colonized peoples face daily throughout the world. And so we say we are the leaders, the African People's Social Party brought our people this far during the most difficult times as the party that is determined to put revolution back on the agenda. We're not saying that we were the only organization that's been engaged in this struggle or that discussion or something like that. We're saying the only organization that has taken possession of the overall global struggle of African people, that has fought for it and that has, in the process of fighting for it, developed the theory based on the reality of our struggle, history of struggle, and our relationship to this process. Only we have been doing that. Only we have been doing that. So the demand by African people for national liberation is a demand that recognizes the fact that we are colonized, that the African nation as a whole lives under foreign domination. We have been waging this concerted struggle for 600 years, since the Portuguese invasion that initiated the capture and enslavement of African people in 1415. The struggle did not start on August 14th, on August 9th, 2014 with Mike Brown. It didn't start on May 25th, 2020 with the murder of George Floyd. It didn't start with the murder of Tamir Rice or Sandra Bland or any of these other people who have become familiar to us through some of the most egregious and attacks that's been known to us publicly in the last period. This struggle started 600 years ago. And so when Portugal attacked Africa and initiated this whole process of selling Black people around the world and the development of the colonial capitalist system itself. Because the African nation has been forcibly dispersed throughout the world, the struggle for national liberation has naturally traveled with us as part of the process that gave rise to the capitalist system as a worldwide system. So the African nation assaulted and then forcibly dispersed throughout the world. We say the struggle for national liberation has traveled with us as part of the process that gave rise to the capitalist system as a worldwide system. So we see African people fighting in Colombia or in Haiti or in Texas or in St. Louis in the United States or fighting in Brazil, etc. You are seeing a consequence of that attack on Africa that dispersed African people, and also we took the struggle with us all over the world because it was that attack that took from us our resources, our sovereignty, our identity, and everything else. And that's the, objectively speaking, what African people are doing everywhere. We're engaged in rectifying that, that contradiction that was imposed on us 600 years ago. So we say, because the African nation has been forcibly dispersed, it's not a voluntary move that we made when we left Africa, forcibly dispersed throughout the world, inside Africa itself. Because the African nation has been forcibly dispersed throughout the world, the struggle for national liberation has naturally traveled with us as part of the process that gave rise to the capitalist system as a worldwide system. And it's really important for us to understand that that's what we're looking at when we see Colombia. That's what we're looking at when we see Haiti. That's what we're looking at when we see Brazil. That's what we're looking at when we see North St. Louis and Sandra Bland murdered in Waller County in Texas, et cetera. This is a part of that process that we are looking at. And the concentrated self-conscious struggle for African national liberation reached its apex under the leadership of Marcus Garvey and the Universal Negro Improvement Association, an African Communities League in the first quarter of the 20th century. And it was informed by the slogan, Africa for Africans at home and abroad. Now, Garvey was born in Jamaica, never even put his foot on the continent of Africa, but built an organization of at least 11 million strong and even more influential than that in terms of the people who were mobilized and influenced by the Garvey movement. And the thing that made Garvey's thing so powerful, it was the concentrated self-conscious struggle for African national liberation, not for Jamaican liberation, not for Liberian liberation, not for Nigerian liberation, but for African liberation that spanned the globe. It recognized the fact that we were one people globally, and Garvey's was the concentrated self-conscious struggle for that. And many people hated, especially liberals and those really influenced by colonial philosophy, and the philosophy that was born of a social system that rested on this foundation of enslavement and colonial enslavement. And what I mean is that the colonialism was really a mode of production. We are really looking at colonialism as a mode of production, as the means by which the society, first of all, great transformation happened in the whole world economy through colonialism, through the attack by Europe on all of the peoples of the world, and especially by Africa, where it was really concentrated and dispersed throughout the world. The whole economy get organized. The advent of a world economy, as opposed to people traveling, trading globally, a single world economy at one juncture called something that what was it called? There was a characterization that they gave it in terms of the enslavement of African people and trade around the world. And this was a critical development. Now you don't just have a bunch of countries in some casual relationship to each other. You got a single world economy, all of it hooked up together in one process. So it's a new whole, not a bunch of separates. It's a new whole that has come into existence through colonialism. It's another mode of production where it was a defining mode of production that connect most people in the world into a single process of production, with African people and others of us who were colonized being a hostage, a host to the production that developed Europe and developed what we now refer to as the Americas. So what will a liberated Africa look like? Because we're talking about that. I hope we know we're talking about that. We keep talking about being free. We're saying that we don't like being killed in the streets in the Americas. We don't like what's happening to us in various places in the Caribbean, etc. So what the hell does it mean? What do we want? We say we want freedom. Well, we had what they call freedom in Haiti. We have what they call freedom in Trinidad. We have what we call freedom in various places around the world. But what the hell does that mean, objectively speaking? So we are talking about actual self-government and control of our own affairs and control of our resources, and being able to define what the future will be and define what our lives will be, control of that. And so since that time, since the Garvey movement, after many setbacks, serious class-based battles within the African community, and the establishment of neo-colonialism as a generalized condition for African people, we are forced to look beyond national liberation to the question of the kind of society we are fighting for, and to identify the social forces necessary to achieve it. And this is one of the things that that has to be stated, like the discussion that was happening in the webinar with that sponsored by the Joko Collective is, how do we go, what are we looking for? What kind of society we're fighting for? And to identify what social forces are necessary to achieve it, and beyond that, how you get it. So Africans, a once free people, existing within our own independent economies in Africa, have been transformed into commodities. You know what a commodity is? A commodity is something that is produced for trade, for the market, for sale. Africans, and this is one of the defining factors, defining features of capitalism. Capitalism is commodity production. That nothing is produced under capitalism except for its value. It's what do you call exchange value for sale, for trade. And so we say that Africans, and once free people existing within our own independent economies in Africa, have been transformed into commodities. First capital, and producers of capital, first workers within a social system defined by the relationship between capitalist production and producers, resting on a foundation of slavery and colonial domination of peoples and territories. National liberation serves the purpose of freeing Africans from direct foreign domination. However, direct foreign domination is not necessary for vicious, life-draining economic exploitation, either by foreign or domestic capital. National liberation under the leadership of the African petty bourgeoisie leaves in place a system of exploitation. And African toilers, producers, continue to be exploited under the aegis of a domestic flag, maybe as in the current situation in Libya, red, black, and green flag. So, so national liberation, it serves the purpose of freeing Africans from direct foreign domination. However, direct foreign domination is not necessary for the vicious, life-draining economic exploitation, either by foreign or domestic capital. This is something that needs to be understood. This is something that was not that obvious in the discussion that happened in the webinar that I just mentioned, that I attended just the other day. To be victorious, our revolution must take place under the leadership of the African working class. This is the role of the African People's Socialist Party, the advanced detachment, the general staff of the African working class. Only the African working class, aligned with other toilers, especially the poor peasants, has a stake in destroying the entire system of exploitation and all of its attendant structures, including the artificial borders that exploit Africa but function as the incubators for the reproduction of the neo-colonial petty bourgeois class as a social force. Only the African working class can do that. And that's something that we can have to understand. So some people say, well, you know, there's no such thing as classes because the white man don't care if you're a worker, if you somebody, if you're unemployed, or if you a big shot, a black person, middle class, it doesn't care. And so therefore it's all the same, but it is not all the same. And because this class division has been introduced into the African world through the imposition of this foreign political economy on our lives, this foreign and alien force that dominates every aspect of our lives, where all of the industry, all of those, certainly the most essential components of the industry, the machinery, is located in the colonial, in the colonizer's nation, the nation state. This is what dominates all of us. And the fact is that the introduction of this system then connected a certain sector of our population of the African world to it. There's a certain sector of the population relied on this for its own existence, for its own successor. And this goes back all the way to the so-called slave trade, where Europeans attacked Africa and they engaged in this hunt for Black people, and African people and chiefs and things like that learned how they thought they learned how to protect themselves and their families from the ruthless attacks by Europe by helping to capture and send some African people into this slavery, or because at the point that they destroyed the African economies themselves, then the only way African people had to make a living was selling brothers and sisters to this white guy, to these foreigners. In the same way they make our communities destitute throughout the world, and especially inside the United States, as an example, but I've seen it in England as well. They make the communities destitute so people don't have a way of making a living, and end up thinking that we're making a living by participating in this economy that's allowable by the colonizers. And what aspect of the economy can you participate in? That which serves imperialism. What does that mean? It means different things at different times. But one thing that it has meant is that if you sell dope, that's one way you can do it. You can sell drugs, you can sell alcohol, and of course you can open up a whole bunch of churches and things like that, which is also a part of a parasitic economy that sucks resources from the African community that the people get nothing back from materially. So only the African working class, aligned with other toilers, especially the poor peasants, has a stake in destroying the entire system of exploitation. and all of its attendant structures, including the artificial borders that exploit Africa, but function as the incubators of the reproduction of the neo-colonial petty bourgeois class as a social force. And again, here, I think it's really important to understand that we say we attack the system, because I've been involved in discussions recently. One had to deal with the whole question of the environmental crisis as it's being experienced by mostly by white people. Because the environmental crisis for us began when Africa was attacked, when indigenous people were attacked. The fact is they killed 56 million so-called Indians, indigenous people in the Americas by 1600. So many that it created a change in the climate because of the overgrowth in communities, villages and cities and things like that, and farmlands. This was an amazing assault. For us, the environmental crisis started with white people. Just like the immigrant crisis, white people started it. This crisis that we're looking at, the colonizers, colonialism, that created this contradiction that we are looking for. So we're saying that only the African working class is compelled to fight for the destruction of class society and the exploitation that produced it. Under the independent revolutionary leadership of the African working class, organized under African internationalist principles, victory will mean the defeat of foreign imperialists and their domestic minions. And again, we are talking about a system. And that's really important to understand, a system. This is the process through which all of the economic and political economy functions as a system. And many people in the discussion that I was in with the climate, folk who were interested in the climate change, similar to other discussions, presupposed that what we were looking at was simply policy. They treat capitalism like a policy. They treat colonial capitalism like a policy. It is not a policy. The policies come from colonial capitalism, but colonial capitalism itself is not a policy. It is the system that has to be assaulted, so that has to be taken on. So you can come up with various kinds of struggles against a particular policy, and that might or may not have some effect on how the system functions. But if you're not attacking the system, it will come up with new policies to oppress you with, even if those become disabled for some reason or another. And that's the thing that the party, the African People's Socialist Party, that's the thing that you comrades have to understand and have to transmit to the whole world, because we're at a place now where much of the world has lost sight of the fact that it's a system that we're struggling against, and the system has to be destroyed, and that it's not just a matter of this policy or that policy, police cameras on this and that, etc. Colonialism is not a policy. The colonialism is a mode of production. It is colonial capitalism. Capitalism grew out of colonialism. That's the thing that we are wanting to, we have to help everybody understand, and we have to struggle like we understand it. So it says that under the independent revolutionary leadership of the African working class, organized under African internationalist principles, victory will mean the defeat of foreign imperialists and their domestic minions. It will mean that the toilers, the workers, and poor peasants in particular, will become the new temporary ruling class, the custodians of the means of production now owned and controlled by capitalists, mostly foreign. Liberation under the leadership of the African internationalist informed workers, organized in the African People's Socialist Party, will mean the end of economic exploitation. And once the imperialists and African petty bourgeois neo-colonials have been crushed, the end of all exploitation. This means that African women who will play or who are playing a fundamental role in the liberation of our Africa will rise to full stature with all the rights and authority this infers. This means a major assault will be made against all restrictions on the rights of women that hide under the flimsy and in most cases false mask of tradition. Nor will African liberation under the leadership of the African working class tolerate social, economic, and political oppression of sectors of the African nation and working class because of spurious bourgeois colonial morality. We condemn the morality and relations that permit Europeans, white people, imperialist corporations, countries, and neo-colonial thugs to exploit our people's life and resources in Africa, and to flaunt laws protecting sovereignty, the environment, and customs with impunity, while attacking African people and the working class based on sexual orientation or relations between same-gender loving individuals. The liberated African worker state will only oppress the imperialists and the neo-colonialists who have surrendered Africa's future to them. And we have to be willing to attack those who attack our fight for liberation, attack the unity of the African nation, the progressive unity of the African nation and working class, by splitting and dividing us into these nonsensical categories that simply undermine our collective capacity to destroy our colonial masters and capitalist exploiters. We will call on the entire African working class and all African patriots to rise up against all who would divide the nation and the working class based on the false contradictions of sexual identity, ethnic identity, and regional and religious differences. The African revolution that liberates and unites Africa and African people under African internationalism, the organized, conscious, and victorious leadership of the African working class will be the death knell of imperialist white power and capitalism as a world economy. It will finally allow for the African workers to take social possession of the means of production. There you are. Our victory will mean the entire process of production, mining, building, manufacturing, shipping, distribution, etc., will occur through workers' councils throughout the production process. This will guarantee safety and creativity throughout. Workers will not approve going into mines that are unsafe, and improvement in the productive process will not be motivated by profit that has no regard for safety and proficiency otherwise, but by the needs and aspirations of workers as producers and consumers. Additionally, because the state of the African economy, smothered by the whims and requirements of imperialist white power, has minimal industrial development, much of the lackluster economic life is centered in the countryside. The African internationalist revolution will be the first major step in the world in resolving the contradiction between the city and countryside. The full rapid development of Africa will require. We will have to reorganize the African economy, destroying all borders, into a full-fledged anti-colonial economy. There you are. The economy has to be reorganized into and all the borders have to come down, separating Africans from each other in Africa and around the world. We will have to reorganize the African economy. That means reorganizing it means also Africa needs access to the labor and genius of African people globally, not just on the continent. Those Africans who are being killed and oppressed in Brazil, those Africans who are in Colombia, we need to be connected in the same global economy. That is to say, connected under an African-led anti-colonial economy. Today's economic activity in Africa is tied to the interests of foreign imperialist exploiters. Every bit of food grown or not grown, every factory, every decision to develop a diamond, gold, iron, or bauxite mine instead of production that satisfies our needs is imperialist driven. It has been the imperialist driven economy that's what really must be understood. We have these discussions around African economy, and they do not seem to recognize that all economic activity occurs within structures and requirements of the colonial capitalist system. That in Africa, people, we brag about, well, we got this many diamonds and this much gold and this much bauxite and et cetera, et cetera. But the reality is that gold, that bauxite, that those resources, those diamonds, they meet the needs of the dominant imperialist economy, the colonial capitalist economy. So we have, in some places, we will have, like in Sierra Leone, or perhaps in South Africa, what a diamond mine, if you will. Diamonds have no intrinsic value. They have no intrinsic value at all. And the fact is that in many instances, especially in Sierra Leone, that I'm more familiar with, whole communities have been wiped out because white people want to get diamonds there, because the colonizer wants to get diamonds. That's the thing that drives the economy in Sierra Leone, not the lima beans and collard greens and other things that we need for our existence there, but diamond mines. And the whole economy is organized and structured in that fashion, so that the world economy, the global economy, so that it meets the requirements of the dominant colonial capitalist system, as opposed to requirements of peoples and countries, and that the only way we can get out of it, we're gonna have to destroy that colonial capitalist system so the people can be free, and peoples can be free to develop economies that meet our requirements as a people, what we need as the people to survive. So the African working class, as the transitory ruling class, will organize production based on the needs of the people rather than the contrived profit-driven and profit-motivated needs of the capitalists. Collective housing, neighborhood councils with the power to solve domestic problems, efficient public transportation, African educational systems, literacy eradication campaigns, centers for music, cultural development and socializing, birthing programs and socialist care for our elderly, time and centers for reflection, revolutionary rehabilitation programs, barefoot doctors deployed into the community as in China, and as in Cuba, places where lovers can go for privacy will become ordinary features of life, overturning the horrible day-to-day grind that characterizes our reality today. Even the form of the family will be reorganized under the dictatorship of the African worker state. It will allow adults to enter into agreements of relationship that are free from economic compulsion. Women will be assured economic independence, so financial duress will not be a factor that determines their commitment to a relationship, nor enslaves their emotion. And by enslave their emotion, what I mean is, if somebody depends on you to pay the mortgage and the rent and to do all these other kinds of things, you can't be sure what their emotions are. How much of their love is based on the fact they know they can't survive. Meet those kinds of economic requirements. People should be free to enter into relationships that are not constrained or defined, determined by those kinds of economic interests, but the collective interests that we have as a community. The immediate role of the African worker state will be to function as a protector of society against incestuous, exploitative, and oppressive relationships and their consequences. African men and women can determine whatever arrangements they contract among themselves, with the state functioning as arbiter only until the time when the rule of habit and tradition overturns the rule of the state that becomes unnecessary in human affairs. Our party also has a deep commitment to the well-being of our African children, recognizing that under the system of parasitic capitalism, our children live with daily trauma. They are demeaned, locked up, and gunned down by the colonial police and tormented in the white school system. And this sounds specific to the US, but the truth is our children all over the world. I mean, there are African children in Congo working in mines, getting the kinds of materials that the imperialist and colonial countries require. African children who find themselves on the front line as soldiers, fighting wars that are created by competition and that initiated by the colonizers. The APSP follows in the footsteps of the African Revolution of Haiti, whose victory in 1804 produced a progressive constitution that for the first time in history abolished all notion of an illegitimate child and pledged a commitment to the nurturing and protection of every child. The African adage declaring The role of the village in raising a child will be given new life. Women will be freed from the burden as isolated individual primary child caregivers. The family now becomes the society in a relationship that has the force of law and collective resources of the people that have been liberated from their role as so-called surplus under private ownership within the capitalist system. This means the institution of state-funded and administered nurseries and child care collective that benefit parents and children in a manner that could never happen under colonial capitalist society developed through the commodification of African parents and children. Parents and the community at large will be able to engage in a stress-free, non-competitive relationship with our children. The African internationalist liberation and unification of Africa and Africans worldwide will be a major blow to destroy the entire capitalist system that was an outgrowth of colonialism. It will be the fundamental instrument in the emergence of world socialism, providing the defining direction of the world economy. The achievement of African internationalist socialism will be the essential force in the achievement of permanent world peace, easily understood when it is recognized that most wars are fought by states contending with each other and with peoples for profit generation, generating markets and resources. We will replace capitalist competition with socialist cooperation, something not possible before now. And we're looking at the African worker state here. And Le Duan was Secretary General of the Communist Party of Vietnam with the responsibility of delivering the political report to their fourth Congress in late December of 1976. In his political report, Le Duan spoke of the possibilities of the socialist worker state after the conquest of national liberation. And I'm quoting Le Duan now. Now that our motherland has recovered complete independence, national independence and socialism have become one. Le Duan continued. Only under socialism can the age-old dream of the working people come true, i.e. liberation from oppression, exploitation, poverty, and backwardness, a life in plenty, with an assured tomorrow, a civilized and happy life. Only socialism can bring to the working people the full right to mastery and restore genuine human dignity to man, enabling him to be the real master of society, of nature, and of himself. Under socialism, our motherland will have a modern economy, advanced culture and science, strong national defense, thereby ensuring our country's eternal independence, freedom, and ever more prosperous development. Only socialism can bring about the unification of our motherland at the highest and fullest degree in the fields of territory, political and moral life, economy, culture, society, as well as in the field of rights and duties, thereby fostering the solidarity and sincere and deep mutual love between all members of society, unquote. There will be no, and this is what Le Duan said, and this is how socialists assume that the world that we are creating will look like. And what Le Duan said is important in part because the party in Vietnam, the Communist Party in Vietnam, the Workers' Party of Vietnam had a responsibility similar to the Workers' Party of the African People's Socialist Party, to our party, to the advanced detachment. Because Vietnam, like Africa and African people, lived under colonial domination. French, one time Japanese, French, and now what we are talking about, and then the Americans. And so you had this organization that had this responsibility to lead the struggle for national liberation, to liberate the Vietnamese nation on the one hand, but also to lead it under the leadership of the Workers' Party. So that liberation meant also a transformation of the society itself. That was what it's based on. That's what it is that we are looking at. We are colonized as a people, but we also recognize that only the working class, through its advanced detachment, can build the kind of society that we need, can transform the society so that we're not just taking power and fitting into the same kind of social system. Well, a problem, of course, with Vietnam and all of the socialist revolutions that's occurred up to now was not recognizing that the road to socialism ultimately is painted black, by which we mean that that the real struggle for against capitalism is a part of the struggle against colonialism, and that this does not happen in a single country. That this is something, and that we have to be conscious of this reality, that what we see is the whole world living under colonial capitalism. And what we see, what we've seen in the past is that the historical basis for the rise of socialism didn't exist, even for the Vietnamese. Only thing that existed for the Vietnamese, like for the Russians, like for the Chinese at this point, is the possibility of socialists taking power. And that's different from saying that the basis for socialism existed. The basis of socialism is the destruction of the colonial pedestal. And that's something that's been picked at and messed with over a period of time. But the assumption that you got socialism just because you got this independence under the Workers' Party in Vietnam was wrong. It was wrong in China. That what is happening now is that the whole world now is engaged. Most of the peoples of the world are engaged in this struggle against colonial domination. It's a world economy resting on colonialism that we are involved in. This is the road. This is the thing that is the historical basis for socialism actually occurring, is the destruction of this pedestal upon which all capitalist activity rests, and we'll have to talk about more about that later. So we say, there will be no forced idleness under post-liberated socialist construction in Africa and abroad. The work to build adequate infrastructure, housing, and schools, to electrify our cities and countryside, to grow food and purify our water and eradicate disease and the deadly mosquito are just some of the tasks guaranteed to offer full employment for our people for years to come. This is productive labor that serves the people instead of bourgeois profit. This is productive labor that cannot happen under colonialist capitalism that grinds down and demoralizes the worker and humiliates the African colonial subject. Capitalist production functions on the base of stolen lands and peoples. It is production that only pays workers and toilers for their ability to produce, never for what we produce. The difference in the two is what capitalists refer to as surplus value or profit. The capitalist keeps this surplus for himself, though he never works or produces anything. And let me just say, we don't have enough time to talk about it now, but in most instances, the colonial capitalism for Africa and other people don't even pay enough for an ability to produce. That is to say, the ability to produce, which means you have to have enough health, you have to have food, you have to have adequate clothing and shelter. That's the thing that gives that the capitalists, generally speaking, in capitalists in European countries, colonial countries, and among colonizers, even in our lands, it gives them enough to do that so that they are able to produce. That's the thing that makes them capable of producing. But for us, that's not important. So that's why you see this death rate of African people. That's why you see this life expectancy of colonized people and Africans being so low, because in most instances, we don't even get enough for the capacity to produce. And so just one dies, get another. One dies, get another. It doesn't matter if you don't live in a length of time. I don't care what kind of what do they call it? Some kind of Medicare for all. It ain't gonna be that way. It doesn't work that way under colonial capitalism. So the African worker state can only come into existence by the workers destroying the colonial base of capitalist production, replacing the oppressive state of the colonialist capitalists and transforming so-called surplus value into social wealth to provide for the well-being of society. This is how the African worker state will provide free healthcare, education, housing, childcare, etc. for the toiling masses. Through expropriating the stolen resources from the colonial capitalists, some people call that reparations, destroying the system of private ownership of social production, that's not your house, private ownership of social production, and creating a system of social ownership of social production, in a word, socialism, the early stage of communism. This is the new world we are fighting for in this party. It's not a world to be achieved through reforming police departments or improving police community relations within the US or anywhere else. It's not something that can be achieved by a $15 per hour minimum wage for workers in general over a period of years. We will have to make a revolution under the leadership of the advanced detachment of the African working class, guided by the advanced theory of African internationalism, to initiate the world free from economic slavery and colonial oppression. This is why we must fight to put revolution on the political agenda for our people once again. Our recognition of the role played by imperialist parasitism in the advent of the capitalist system as a world system also gave the African People's Socialist Party an understanding of the nature of the capitalist state as distinguished from the European feudal state that preceded it. I know I'm going a little bit over, Comrade Director Akile, but I think it's important to finish this. Most white socialists and many so-called progressives recognize the state as a coercive instrument in the service of the ruling class that is necessary to protect the status quo from disruption and overthrow by exploited classes and to compete with capitalists internationally for projects, for profits at their expense. However, unlike other states in history, the capitalist state did not come into existence for the purpose of protecting a domestic social system. It was organized to deal with the reorganization of the world's political economy that came into being as capitalism required the dispossession and enslavement of Africans and much of the world previously external to Europe. So in France, you had feudal state. In England, you had the feudal state. Throughout Europe, you had the feudal state. That was the state as it existed. But now, with this, these local and domestic imperial forces going out and capturing Africa, and the whole trade, everything is being transformed. And the state that comes into being now is a state that it comes into being as a consequence of the rise of capitalism through colonial slavery, through the attack on the indigenous peoples in the US and other places around the world. This is the emergence of the capitalist state, like capitalism itself. It's born as a world system, not as a local system. And it's important to understand that. And so the capitalist state is different in that regard than what was the feudal state. And so the capitalist state rose in contention with the feudal state in Europe. It rose in contention with the feudal state in Europe. Just like the socialist state, to come into existence is going to have to destroy the capitalist state. In short order, that is to say, the capitalist state became a popular white people's state that employed enthusiastic and willing masses of white people as a form of institutionalized emergent state violence used to kill and take land from the indigenous peoples of what is now North America and Australia, and to enslave Africans and others worldwide. This is an interesting contradiction. We don't have enough time to talk about it, but we will, I guess, moving forward. In fact, part of the much touted progress of capitalism was its elevation of ordinary white people to the status of landowners on stolen land and workers in a slave-developed economy, because the white people didn't own land. And when they were in Europe under feudalism, they didn't own land. I'm talking about the majority of the people. They only became landowners as a consequence of stealing land, stealing the land of the Americas, New Zealand, Australia, all these other places where Europeans went out and colonized territories. This was the emergence, the emancipation, if you will, of the European toilers. That was an assault, part of the assault on feudalism that gave rise to capitalism and to white power as a global phenomenon. This was the economic incentive for white men scalping indigenous people in the Americas, slaughtering indigenous people in Australia and Africa, and waging an independent, so-called independent struggle against European feudal states to steal indigenous lands throughout South America. The brutality of the capitalist state against Africans within the US and elsewhere, the viciousness of the capitalist state in subduing African, indigenous, Asians, and other people is not an anomaly. It is inherent to its nature and consistent with its genesis as a state protecting a social system rooted in colonial slavery. While the capitalist state is a coercive institution that sometimes mistreats, jails, and even shoots its European citizens who get caught in its friendly fire,
its primary purpose is the violent suppression of the colonized population. As African internationalism has explained, white people function as part of the capitalist state in its treatment of Africans, Mexicans, the indigenous, etc. Its true function as a colonial state is raw and exposed. The purpose of the US state is to contain the other, the colonial pedestal upon which all capitalist activity occurs and which benefits the entire colonizer population. This is why in all European-controlled countries, white citizens are generally united with efforts of the state to crush any forms of African and colonial resistance. And this is also a statement of the significance of the party's solidarity front, of our party, where white colonizers have been organized under the leadership of the party to function as a part of the African revolution to overturn colonial domination. We don't have enough time. Speak to this in this political report, other section. It is true that democracy is a form of the state. However, for the colonized, the pursuit of democracy is the struggle to limit and eliminate the intervention of the colonial state in their lives and affairs. This is why our party has raised the demand of Black community control of the police in the popular struggle against police murder in the US. This is why we have instituted numerous African people's tribunals to try and judge colonial aggression against our people, whether for reparations or police murders. I'm gonna take it a little further, comment Director Akile, because revolutionary violence is necessary for our freedom. Our pursuit of genuine freedom, which can only come about through the total liberation and unification of every square inch of Africa and African people worldwide, the African nation, can only come about through revolution. By this we mean that the colonialist capitalist state must be overthrown and the blight of the capitalist system eradicated from the face of the earth. History has proven that it is totally impossible to cajole the oppressor into turning power over to the dispossessed laboring masses upon which his system and future relies. Nor will the colonial capitalist state willingly surrender its authority as protector of the capitalist system through elections that it establishes and administers for the resolution of generally non-violent struggle between competing sectors of the capitalist class for control of the system. There will be no exception for African people in pursuit of power over our lives. We will have to fight for it. It is not simply a struggle with misguided people who are afflicted with an irrational hatred of or fear of African people. Massive fortunes and a parasitic way of life purchased through bloody conquest depend on this current arrangement, this status quo, for their success and survival. It will, in the final analysis, take the force of arms to overcome the armed forces of the colonial capitalist state. It is the vicious armed forces of colonial white power that enables the ongoing domination of African people. All the petty bourgeois nonsense about a Willie Lynch syndrome is exposed in the face of the concrete reality of the armed to the teeth colonial state. All the petty bourgeois nonsense about a Willie Lynch syndrome is exposed in face of the concrete reality of the armed to the teeth colonial state. Revolutionary armed struggle against colonialism and capitalism is the only thing that has ever brought any real semblance of liberation to oppressed peoples anywhere on earth, and there will be no exception for Africans. There's no correct religion, culture, or secret documents or handshakes hidden from our access that once discovered can free us. Africans will have to assume full responsibility for our liberation by recognizing that revolution is the only solution, and that we are going to have to pursue revolution through the purifying, cleansing, exuberant process of organized, politically informed, unrelenting revolutionary violence. Uhuru. Comment Director Akile.
Uhuru, Chairman, well, I just really want to appreciate this study and just really appreciate and salute how clear everything is when you're talking about what will a liberated Africa look like, building the African socialist worker state, and what it's going to take to get Africans out of the situation and, really the entire planet that's in the death grip of colonial capitalism. by saying that it's going to take revolutionary violence to overcome this, to get us out of this. It's just very clear. You say, just, yeah, it is. And it's a beautiful future that we are fighting for. And just really want to appreciate this study and how mobilizing it is.
Yeah, there's some things we're not going to be able to tiptoe around. You know, we're going to have to get it, and we have to provide that kind of leadership. And I just want to say, I know you're going to say something about it later on, but you know, the African Liberation Day webinar that the African People's Socialist Party, our party, will be hosting on May 22nd and May 23rd, just a few days from now. The title of that is Build the African Worker State. And it's going to be a webinar that will have as participants Africans who are in the party, who are part of the African Socialist International in various parts of the world, Africa, Europe, the Caribbean, United States, etc. And this is part of the trek, the movement that we are making toward taking back our freedom, our Africa, and building the whole new world, because we're not going to be able to tiptoe our way out of this. We're at a real critical moment in history now, where political and ideological clarity is absolutely necessary now. And so I just wanted to say that, and you know, I hope people are prepared. And you know, there's what the Europeans used to refer to as utopian socialists or utopian communism. And we see a lot of that. That's what we're hearing all the time. It makes the assumption that somehow this socialism, everybody, so many people talking about we're socialists, we want socialism, et cetera, et cetera. But they often seem to make the assumption that that just wanting socialism and saying socialism and and even having marches that call for socialism is going to be enough to make it happen. That's a form of utopianism. That's a form of assuming that somehow socialism will automatically respond to this ill-defined popular will that might be coming. That's not true. It's not true for a number of reasons, one of which is that it's absolutely necessary to define capitalism, colonial capitalism, because white people have fought for socialism for ages, and that socialism that they fought for required the ongoing existence of the colonial world that dominates us, that we live in. They haven't fought for a socialism that was based on recognition that the whole capitalist enterprise rests upon the colonial oppression and extraction of our lives and values from us. They haven't. Even when we get into discussions around women's rights and sometimes around the rights of homosexuals, the rights of the question of the environment. These discussions are discussions that happen with the assumption that all of this stuff can happen while Africans and the rest of us, peoples of the world, are living under colonial domination. No way like that. It's not going to be like that. So we got to talk about what this socialism is that they're talking about. That's why African internationalism is so crucial, because it recognizes that the world that we live in, the political economy, the global economy, capitalist economy, is one that rests upon a foundation of colonial domination, colonial slavery of the peoples of the world, and that the peoples of the world are not fighting to save the planet for white people. We're not fighting for white women's rights or white homosexuals' rights while we live under colonial domination. The fact is, the whole system got to go. And in order for the system to go, the colonialism has to be attacked. In order for colonialism to be attacked, then all of those questions that we just talked about have to be waged. All those struggles have to be waged under the leadership of the African working class, fighting for the total destruction of colonial capitalism. This is something that I think is really important to say and for us to understand. So there are these utopian socialists who have thought that somehow you can just say we are socialists and we want socialism and socialism is better, or that we can convince the oppressor, we can convince the corporations somehow to bring socialism into existence. When again, the whole system rests upon this foundation of colonialism, and they're not going to turn it over just because you like it, just because you want it. It's going to have to be taken the same way capitalism had to displace feudalism to come into existence. That's how colonial capitalism came into existence. And the way colonial capitalism, socialism is going to come about is going to have to be through defeating and destroying colonial capitalism. Uhuru, comrade.
Uhuru, Chairman. Well, again, thank you so much for this incredible study, and really excited to address some of the questions, the discussion that's happening right now in the chat section. And if you haven't asked your question, go ahead and type that into the Facebook or YouTube chat. Also want to recognize where people are tuning in from. We have Lakeland, Florida, St. Louis, Missouri, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Richmond, Virginia, Occupied Azania or South Africa, Brooklyn, New York, St. Petersburg, Florida, Battle Creek, Michigan, Birmingham, Alabama, Oakland, California, San Diego, California, Memphis, Tennessee, Houston, Texas, Jamaica, Queens, New York, Huntsville, Alabama, Chicago, Illinois, Newark, New Jersey, Hempstead, New York, Shreveport, Louisiana, Tampa, Florida, and Orlando, Florida that checked in. So Huru, comrades, thank you for tuning in no matter where you're located. And we're going to go ahead and get into our first question, Chairman, that came from Comrade Kemu in Birmingham, Alabama. He said and asked, Chairman, we Africans still have organizational division and differences. It is without a doubt that you are the leader and voice of the African world. My question is, because of these differences, does the party, it says negate, but does the party negate those that don't see eye to eye with the party, but unite with about 80% in points of unity?
Well, I don't know what that means, and I don't know what 80% of the points of unity. If that 80% of the points of unity, if that doesn't include the fact that the colonial capitalism has to be overturned, if it doesn't include the fact that it's going to be the African workers who have absolutely no stake and the poor peasants in the existing social system, and that they have to be the critical social forces that's part of it. If it doesn't recognize that the African working class and African people need our own revolutionary party that functions as the advanced detachment, the general staff, the leadership of this revolutionary process. If it doesn't include some of these like critical kinds of features, and that we are one nation of African people been forcibly dispersed around the world, I don't know how much of that 80% that's being discussed is contained within some critical questions. And, you know, an organization and revolutionary organization just fundamental to everything that we're talking about. So we do have relationships, and we do work with people who don't agree with us on a lot of things. And we're not saying that everybody even can be in the party. Everybody can't be. We don't want everybody in the party, and everybody won't want to be in the party. And I think it's important to say that it's the responsibility of the party to open the door and to provide the leadership for all of the toiling masses and progressive forces, even though many of them will not come into the party. And the final other thing I want to say is that I think it's really important for us to recognize that sometimes disagreement is not just difference of opinions in the abstract, but they represent difference in class aspirations and outlook. And so I don't know how helpful I was in answering that, Comrade Kemu, but that's my response. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, and thank you, Comrade Kemu, for your question. And now we go to the next one, which came from Adanya Salam. Adanya asks, how do we address the youth in terms of politics and language? There is a whole individualistic, quote unquote, renegade thought among the 17 to 25-year-old club. I understand the nuances. The lingo that worked in the 60s and 70s isn't reaching them today, as they sometimes don't recognize themselves as part of the collective. So that's Adanya's question.
Well, first of all, I don't want us to idealize the 60s and the 70s. It didn't just fall upon us out of the sky. I mean, I was part of that. I was one of those who organized in places in the South where knocking on the doors of impoverished people who lived on dirt roads and things like that, Africans, and just saying, hey, let's go vote. And they were terrified by the whole notion of voting. And I was there when people were afraid to even be called Black people. But it was organization, it was struggle. It was the political leadership that was provided by the struggle that helped to transform that. And so there's no reason to assume that young people of today would be prepared to make a revolution any more than young people of days prior. That they are often most likely to be susceptible to revolutionary ideas because sometimes they haven't been consolidated ideologically in the same way as older people, and sometimes because young people are not trapped by things like mortgage payments and haven't been disciplined by colonial labor like some of the older people. Sometimes that contributes to the willingness and ability to people to join the revolution. But I want to say this: there's a real problem that many people assume that this discussion and being on computers and things like that, or even going to protest marches, is enough to change the consciousness and attitudes of our people, or to do it in a way that gives it coherent organizational strength. That takes organizers. That takes people who, revolutionary parties, who organize among the people, among the oppressed and what have you, and engage with the oppressed and struggling around their interests. That's the thing that's going to make the difference. That's the thing that's going to change the attitude of people. You won't be, for me, you sound like a person who may be young, too young to remember part of what this movement of the 60s had to go up against. We had to fight against the fact that the bourgeoisie in this country had flooding our communities with movies and songs and things like that, that really idealized not only individualism, but drugs and pimps and cops and stuff. And that the movement had to come up with creative ways to create new heroes for the masses of our people. That's one of the things that made the Black Panther Party such a significant force visibly, because it created a whole new set of heroic figures. We have to go beyond just heroic figures today. But the point that I'm making is that that's been a part of the struggle, always has been a part of the struggle. So there's nothing really wrong with young people today. Something is wrong with what professes to be revolutionary leadership today and the effectiveness of the United States government in murdering and killing revolutionary leaders. And right now got some of the most critical forces in our history locked up in these concentration camps, dying as political prisoners and prisoners of war that don't even get addressed. So I have full confidence in the young people of today. I have total confidence in the young people of the day. I think that we're looking at a generation of people that's going to be able to go beyond anything that was conceived of in the last period. We believe in the African People's Socialist Party that the 1960s was just a dress rehearsal, that the real deal, the real revolution is upon us right now, and that the forces who will make that revolution will have the benefit of our own party. They won't have to do like we had to do, had to learn what revolution was, had to learn that we needed revolutionary organization, had to go through this whole process of civil rights and Black Lives Matter, et cetera, to get to revolutionary conclusion. We have a party now that starts off with revolutionary conclusions and that sets out to organize the people around that with tactics and strategy to make this revolution, recognizing that revolution is a process and not just an event. So I think that I have complete faith and confidence in young people. The problem that we have is the kind of leadership forces that are put before masses of our people as leadership and that take people into these dead ends, these swamps of opportunism, and other forms of liberalism. Uhuru. Let's come at Ayanya.
Adanya.
Uhuru.
Uhuru, Adanya, and Uhuru, Chairman, thank you so much again for that answer. And just want to also recognize we got people tuning in from Toronto, Canada, Fayetteville, North Carolina, Bermuda, and Trinidad. So Uhuru, comrades. Our next question comes from Comrade King L. And he asked, Uhuru, Chairman, thank you for your distinction of what socialism is in regards to Vietnam and China. Do you see a distinction between that and the communism in Cuba? If yes, what? If yes, what? If not, if no, why not? Sorry.
Well, let me just say, I love the Cuban Revolution for what it provided, but it had limitations too. See,
I guess in order for some people to understand that most of us are new to political life and political theory and things like that. And most of the revolutionary struggles of the 1960s were based on the assumption that the seizure of power by communists or by socialists actually meant that we had a communist society. And what has happened is that in Cuba and in Russia and in China, what we had was communists or socialists who took power. And having taken power, that wasn't the same thing as having a socialist society. It meant that we had now socialists who had the power. And having power, they were able to make certain kinds of transformations in the economy, establish different kinds of relationships. Russia and Cuba, for example. Russia was really important for helping Cuba to be sustained, because even after the Cuban Revolution, we still live in the global capitalist system. And that global capitalist system is what it was. It wasn't a global socialist system, anything like that. Even though the Soviet Union did exist, there was no global socialist system. It was a capitalist system. And those of us who, those forces who thought they were functioning in a socialist society were really on this kind of oasis surrounded by a capitalist sea of shark-infested sea. So Cuba was heroic. And what I loved about Cuba was much of its revolutionary assumptions were so had the highest moral kinds of content and component. I mean, so Cuba was able to send revolutionary forces to Africa. Che Guevara, of course, who, as we know, came from Argentina, but a critical force in the Cuban Revolution, went into Africa with the objective of trying to promote and lead what would be an international, a continental-wide guerrilla war, revolutionary movement to liberate Africa. So, and then of course the Cubans went and fought in Angola against the South Africans. So you have these great examples of possibilities, but you also had the limitations that without Russia, and for a while, you know, Venezuela was helpful, but the United States government was able to quarantine, isolate, kill Hugo Chavez and what have you, and deny Cuba those resources. So the high ideals of the Cuban Revolution, which were of the highest, ran into the stone wall, this limitations imposed on it by the existence of a global capitalist system. So we had a socialist in power in Cuba, but you didn't have socialism because it couldn't be socialism because, again, the world economy was a capitalist economy and it isolates and starves Cuba even up to today, despite all the great things that Cuba has been able to do under those limitations, Comrade King L. Uhuru.
Uhuru, thank you to Comrade King L for that question and Chairman for the answer. We move now to our next question, which comes from Ridge Francis on YouTube. Ridge asks, Uhuru, do you think it's a good idea to sanction all of these colonial companies by destroying their mines? I think like the actual mines everywhere we find them in Africa.
I don't think that, I think that what has to happen is that we have to be a revolutionary organization on the African continent and globally. And that, you know, I mean, the question of whether to destroy their mines, it's not like there's some one or single economic venture that the colonialists are involved in that once attacked will will destroy capitalism, colonial capitalism. That it is a social system. It is not simply a single industry, it's a social system that has to come under attack. In order to do that, you have to have a revolutionary movement that targets that social system and that moves to replace it with another social system. And in the process of doing that, you might look at mines or any other thing, but that's the fundamental thing that we're involved in. And then the other thing is that we have to have a revolutionary organization. The African People's Socialist Party truly is involved in creating revolutionary organizations throughout the African world. I mean, on the continent itself, many of you know that we are in South Africa.
that we're working in Tanzania, that we're working in Chad, that we're working in Ivory Coast, that we're working in Nigeria, that we're working in Sierra Leone, in Ghana, and Uganda, and other places that I've left out. So we are doing that work, but it's still fledgling, and that we have to develop a revolutionary capacity. That's one of the reasons why this African Liberation Day mobilization happening on May 22nd and 23rd. Go to alduhuru.org so that you can get information on that. That's part of the whole process of pulling together, the ongoing process of our party to pull together the revolutionary organization and philosophy theory, and that will allow our revolution to emerge full-fledged. So organization is a fundamental part of it. Ideology is a fundamental part of it, of the struggle as well. And then we decide, we learn as we're moving forward where our strategic blows should be thrown. And it may have to do with mines and other things like that, but I don't think that's the fundamental task. I think right now is to spread the philosophy of African internationalism, to create organization that have as a primary responsibility to take African internationalism throughout the African world. That's the thing that will guide, that will tether our movement to what end? So that destroying a mind, if it's not connected to overturning this social system and creating another social system, if it's not connected to uniting Africa and African people globally, if it's not connected to creating a whole different social system, it's just destroying our minds. And you don't have to work too hard to destroy minds. The way the colonialists do it, they almost self-destruct and to the detriment of all these African people who are working in these mines, etc. So, Rich, I hope that was helpful. Uhuru.
Uhuru, thank you, Rich, for the question. We move now to our next question, which is from Comrade Tacharwa. Tacharwa asks, Uhuru Chairman, people who misunderstand the revolutionary process and don't understand the role of the masses in the party assume that our fight for revolution lacks tactics/strategy. Please elaborate.
Yeah, first of all, let me just say, that's a good question. We've recognized in the African People's Socialist Party, we came into existence at a time where the African Revolution was under assault all around the world. We came into existence recognizing that the African Revolution was one revolutionary process, and that masses of African people had to be drawn into the struggle, but that we had to have a revolutionary party, that this was the central feature organization that was missing. We had to have a revolutionary party, and that this revolutionary party had to be a party of cadre, of forces that are able to organize masses of people and to bring masses into political life, and that the strength of the party would be determined by the connection that we have with the masses. And that's why our party has created things like African National Women's Organization, Reparations Organization, Prisons Organizations. That's why we have created the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, creating all of these fronts and capacity, African People's Education and the All African People's Development Project. All these fronts, doors through which masses of African people can be connected in some kind of strategic whole. And that brings masses to us, but also provides the leadership of the party, because that's the critical missing element. Not masses. Masses are not the critical missing element. We've seen that in the rebellions that happened just in the last few months. The thousands of people have risen up, but to what end? We didn't have the organization capacity that we needed to give the kind of on the ground leadership to all of that was necessary. So the party is the missing element, and the party has to have these connections with the masses. And that's not just some ephemeral connection. It's not just getting a number of likes on the computer. It means organizing on the ground, territory, spaces, and things like that. And it means that, yes, we have to have tactics and strategy. And the fundamental strategic objective of the African Revolution is to win, I'm saying the African Revolution, is to win the masses of African people to an understanding that we have to have independence, that we have to have collective independence. Because if the masses of African people don't unite with that, or it's not that they don't unite, if that hasn't been something that's established as part of the ideological fabric of our struggle, then there ain't gonna be no independence. And what the African internationalism teaches us is that that's the fundamental component, as a fundamental component of the struggle that we're involved in. So tactics and strategy are critical. And you have to know where you're going in order to have tactics and strategy for a long term. Otherwise, you're just functioning as opportunists. And when we say opportunists, we don't mean that as just some kind of invective that we are throwing at somebody because we don't like you. The point is that there has to be, we have to have a long-term objective, overturning this system that guides everything that we do, every tactic, every strategy that we come up with have to be tactics and strategy that have as their conclusion the liberation of all of Africa and African people and the unification of African people. And so all the tactics and strategy have to be leading toward that. Doesn't mean that you're not able to speak to specific kinds of issues and crises and struggles that happen wherever you're located, et cetera. You do that, but you do that informed by the fact of by these other things I just mentioned. Part of it is one thing that we've done, the African People Solidarity Committee, which is a critical thing that we created in 1976. And we created the African People Solidarity Committee for a number of reasons, but one of the things that's really important, the African People Solidarity Committee is a solidarity front of our party. It's an organization of mostly white people that has created a mass organization, Uhuru Solidarity Movement, that's extraordinarily active throughout this country and in about 8 other countries around the world. And the thing is that one of the things that kept the parties alive and surviving at the time where the whole African Revolution was under assault, where they were assassinating, killing forces, isolated the African Revolution in this country and around the world, but we made it difficult for them to isolate us because we had these North Americans, these white people who were working in among the colonizers themselves, taking the revolution to their bedrooms and to their neighborhoods and things like that. So that's a part of the whole strategic thing, to not allow our revolutionary movement to be isolated, to win as many people as possible, not just as some sympathetic support for the Black people who've been treated so badly, but to solidarity with our intent to take our freedom to solidarity with our struggle against colonialism. I mean, so, that's just a kind of exposition of a bit, I think, speaking to some of the questions that Comrade T'Challa raised. Uhuru.
Uhuru, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, T'Challa, always coming with the questions. So the next question comes from Comrade Diop, and he asks, Uhuru, I appreciate this study. Is there a history of solidarity from white prisoners?
From white prisoners?
White prisoners is his question.
I don't know. I mean, I know that one of the things that I know the African Revolution has been able to show solidarity, especially with white prisoners who were in Ireland. That if you Google up the blanket prisoners in Ireland, I think Ireland stands out to me because as quiet as it kept, Ireland existed under British colonialism for something like 800 years, and still experiences colonial domination. So I know that we had a lot of solidarity with that movement, but I cannot speak well on that question, Comrade Diop. I can't speak that well on that question. I would imagine there has been some instance of solidarity, but I can't speak to it effectively. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Okay, well, our next question comes from Comrade Matsamela, and he asks, Uhuru, Chairman, can you expand on the contradictions involved in the Willie Lynch syndrome theories?
Yeah, that's a profound contradiction because I'm sure it's something created by African petty bourgeoisie. Because it's the Willie Lynch thing presupposes that there's some document that was written by a slaver in the Caribbean that came to the United States to teach the white slavers here how to maintain control of Africans. And it had to do with setting Africans one against the other, light skins against dark skins, and things like that. And that this would be able to use to control Africans for 300 and some odd years or something to that effect. It's false. It wasn't even, I really believe it was written by petty bourgeois Africans. Somebody probably knows who wrote it. Even Carmen Massimella may know. But the point is that that is something that came about subsequent to the defeat of the Black Revolution in the 1960s. And that made it, what it did was turn how we fight against each other. It turns it into an internal kind of contradiction, as opposed to recognizing that the real reason that white people and white power control us is not because of some lesson that was given by some cracker from the Caribbean some years ago. It was through murder, violence. This thing that's just killed George Floyd. That's why police in our community, everywhere you look, you find nothing but police everywhere. There's no lesson that anybody could give that would keep us dominated, people who are oppressed like we oppressed. And the fact is that we suffer the same consequences all over the world. And so Willie Lynch would have to be a traveling salesperson to convince all of the Black people to suffer the kinds of offensive and conditions that we suffer under white colonial terror. No, it's the state, it's the colonial capitalist state that's responsible for this. And you have a different approach to a struggle when you understand that than when you think that it's somehow something that we're doing to each other. That because we've been tricked. There is no trick in the world that could maintain the peace that in the face of the kind of terror and oppression that we experience as a people. And that's problematic as hell. And it's the petty bourgeoisie that does not want to contend with the colonial capitalist state, doesn't recognize that we're gonna have to fight our way out of this thing, and that the police, the military, all of these forces are necessary, the court system, the jail, the prison. That's why the prisons are locked up with so many Africans. No Willie Lynch did that. No Willie Lynch made it necessary for 1 out of 8 people in the world who are in prison being an African in the United States. That wasn't Willie Lynch. That was colonial white power and the colonial capitalist state. And recognizing that is just critical, I think, for moving forward, Carmen Massimella. I hope I did some justice to that, Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, I definitely think you did some justice to it. I think that's so important to just really expose, because it's tossed around so much. And you know, in all these different circles, you hear about Willie Lynch syndrome, and then people just want to give a whole speech and an analysis of this thing. And it's, you know, and I just really appreciate this.
But it's better than fighting white power. You know, there's a new book out that was written by a man named Richard Wright some years ago. It's just now being released. I think Wright was one of the most incredible writers I've ever seen. But one book he wrote was called Native Son. And the thing about Native Son, the protagonist here was a guy named Bigger Thomas. And Bigger lived in Chicago under just cruel colonial circumstances, just like now. And he had a date with his friend to go and rob this white guy, this shop owner. And that was a terrifying thing, especially back then, to think about going and robbing this white guy. So Bigger couldn't say that he was afraid to go rob the white guy. What he did was, when he got to the pool room where he was supposed to meet his partner to go carry out this thing, he found some reason to pick a fight with his friend so that he wouldn't have to fight the white guy. And I wouldn't have to go rob the white guy. And I think the Willie Lynch syndrome concept gives us this excuse, that we fight with each other because of some inherent deficiency or some deficiency by being tricked by the white man, as opposed to going and fighting the white man, fighting the colonizer, fighting the colonial capitalist state. I think that's what we're looking at when we look at this Willie Lynch syndrome phenomenon.
Guru, Chairman, thank you so much. I mean, it's easier to fight each other, right, than to go after the colonizer and the colonial capitalist state. So
yeah, in fact, there used to be a complaint in the African community that we can just kill each other and the police don't do nothing, right? But touch a white man, that's it. Everybody understood that, and in fact, that's a kind of a subtlety that we run into every day when we now talk about fighting against police violence. Is, well, black people kill black people, you're not doing anything, you're not saying anything. That's the assumption that somehow we equate contradictions among ourselves with the overwhelming contradiction that exists between the fundamental contradiction that exists between us and colonial white power. Uhuru.
Uhuru, thank you so much, Chairman. And thank you, Comrade Mazzamela, for the question. So we have a little time left, probably about a little less than 10 minutes. So this next question came from Comrade Life. He says, Uhuru, how important is it in this period, which gives the people access to information and evidence, to organize tribunals to prosecute and punish those who attack and kill us?
Thank you for that question, Comrade Life. I think that's really important. I think we should be doing tribunals. And let me tell you something. There are people who do these tribunals, they call them mock trials. I'm not talking about mocking anything. I'm talking about put them on trial. And when necessary and or possible, even use rules that have been established by the colonizers themselves for holding trials and rules of evidence and things like that. Put them on trial and have the people able to make judgments about them. Of course, we can stretch the trials out because there's certain limitations placed on trials that we see that won't permit use of certain kinds of evidence, but history is part of the evidence that we will use. Because you can't understand anything that's happening without, today, without something about the history. But I think we should put them on trial, and we should have the community aware that we put them on trial. And that even if we don't have at this moment the ability to carry out a sentence, that we should put them on trial, we should sentence them. And as our movement for power against colonialism grows, then we grow our capacity to carry out sentences that's been passed by the people. And that the difference in the trials that they conduct, that's responsible for all these African people being in prisons, and the trial that we will conduct is because they do have armies and they do have systems and things like that in place to carry out the verdict. And what that tells us is that we have the ability to put them on trial and say, this is what our verdict and this is our sentence. Then the thing that we have to do is achieve the power to carry out the sentence. That puts before us, that leaves a real material objective before us as a people. Put them on trial, put them on trial. And bring the people into this process of judging them as we are constantly being judged and sentencing them as we are constantly being sentenced by them under colonial domination. Uhuru, Comrade Life.
Uhuru, Comrade Life, thank you for that question. Thank you, Chairman. We have, let's see, because some of these questions are kind of, you'd probably want longer time with them. But I'll ask this last question from Comrade Hinnock in Bermuda. And he asks, Uhuru, Chairman, comrades, please speak to the vaccine agenda. Many islands, including Bermuda, are being pressured to vaccinate and are protesting.
Uhuru, Comrade Hinnock, it's really good to hear from you. And I feel limited in my response, in my ability to respond effectively to that. Let me just tell you that the hesitancy of the people to accept the vaccination in Bermuda, in the United States, in Africa, and various other places, this is a contradiction that they are running into. And I say they, I'm talking about the corporations that produce these vaccines that also uses these governments to get these vaccines into our bodies. They're running into this contradiction because Africans won't take it. Not just Africans, there are other peoples who are refusing to take the vaccine. And so the reason that people are refusing to take the vaccine are manifold. Critical to all of them is how we are treated by colonialism. People like to point in the US to the Tuskegee experiment, and yeah, Tuskegee did happen, but people who've never heard of Tuskegee, Africans and other people, refuse to take the vaccine because colonialism is a whole enterprise. It's not just vaccine that they gave us in Tuskegee. It's not just what they did to us with Dr. Death, as he was called in South Africa, who set up clinics in the townships of African communities under apartheid, with the assumption, with the promise that he was going to give us vaccinations to protect us from HIV/AIDS, but actually was injecting us with AIDS. It's not just that. It's not just the fact that they use medical experiments against us all around the world. It's the totality of the colonial experience that makes us naturally and normally suspicious of anything that they bring us. And that's natural and normal. And that, in my view, is a scientific expression. It's an expression of science. It's based on the evidence that we have as a people of how they've treated us with virtually every question, including things like with vaccine and medical experimentation that they use us. The fact that there's such a thing, they created a heart transplant. Where did they start the heart transplant? First place, using victims in South Africa, for that purpose, experiments and stuff. So people naturally and normally reject this vaccine, and I don't blame them. And so there's supposedly science that shows the fact that the vaccines are safe, and they pull out people who look just like us to take the vaccines to guarantee that they're safe. I can't guarantee you that they're safe, Comrade Hennock. And I do believe that with the all African People's Education Development Project, Economic Development Project, APDEP, that certain protocols have been established to try and deal with this. We were first out of the gate with this. We went throughout our African communities, and even when Fauci was saying that no masks were necessary and that masks might even be dangerous, we were telling people to get masks, and we were actually in certain places making masks, had our organization making masks for people to wear. We tried to initiate socialist distancing to try to protect ourselves and things like that. But I am, and I think that the All African People's Economic Development Project, APDEP, is right now, if they haven't already done it, are preparing to release some position on whether the vaccine should be taken. I know some medical advisors associated with our work have already taken the vaccine, and so I cannot say, Comrade Hennock, I think that what we should do is work to strengthen our immune system. We work to work out, to eat as well as we can eat, to take vitamin C, zinc, that kind of thing, D3, to have a clean diet, removing as much sugar and stuff like that out of the diet as we can. But we should do that automatically all the time. We should do that. So I can't say that the people should take the vaccination, the vaccine. Like I said, the All African People's Development Empowerment Project has created protocols, and I think may have actually come out with a statement. I know some of the health workers associated, doctors, as well as other health care workers have taken the vaccine. I know that has happened, but I don't know for sure whether or not they put out a definitive statement around whether people should do it or not. I know that's not a satisfactory answer, but I don't have a satisfactory answer. I think that's legitimate suspicion that African people have around this thing. I think one of them, let me just say this, another suspicion associated with the fact that we know that like any other product that's created under the colonial capitalist system, is there for profit. to pushing them out there is motivated not to cure people as much as it is motivated for profit. And to the extent that it's there to cure people, and this is something that we should weigh in making this decision, it's done in part because we do live in a global community, and that even the slave master, the colonizer, has to be concerned if people all around has this disease and what it would mean to them and to the economy. I think another factor is that Cuba, China, Russia, and other countries are also developing vaccines. And so that, and Cuba, China, and Russia don't have a particular interest in doing to us what white power here has an interest in doing to us. And so that might make a statement about the efficacy of it, and whether people should be able to trust this process more than they would have trusted something that was happening only in a vacuum and only in the United States. Uhuru, I know I've talked a long time and it's pretty close to ending this. So Henok, just want to appreciate your presence here, and just send a shout out to you and all the other comrades there in Barbados. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, and
Bermuda, I said Barbados.
yeah.
Yeah.
Uhuru, thank you so much, Chairman, and thank you, Henok. And to say that the All African People's Development and Empowerment Project did put out a statement regarding the vaccines. It's printed in the May 2021 issue of the Spear, and it's also on the burningspear.com. Should Black people take the COVID-19 vaccine? So thank you, Chairman. And I'm going to move to announcements, but just want to pass it to you for any closing remarks before we end today.
African Liberation Day, May 22nd, 23rd. ALDUhuru.org. Let's build an amazing international event to forward the struggle for building the African worker state. Uhuru. Thank you, comrades.
Uhuru, thank you so much again, Chairman. This has been a very profound study, extremely powerful. And again, everything that we're doing, it just gives us motivation to continue fighting when you're able to lay out the future, what this looks like, and that colonial capitalism is not permanent, that we have the ability to destroy it, and we have our own vehicle, the African People's Socialist Party, to do that. So thank you so much, Chairman. And yeah, now we're going to go into our closing announcements. For everyone who had questions that did not get answered, just to let you know, we will take them during the Q&A portion of next week's Molly Taught Me Sunday study. So don't worry, your question will be addressed. This study was brought to you by the Department of Agitation and Propaganda, where we're winning the war of ideas. For your revolutionary news and analysis, you can visit theburningspear.com. And for revolutionary radio, dynamic shows, and music by Africans all around the world, tune into Black Power 96.3 FM, broadcasting out of St. Petersburg, Florida, and accessible via the Black Power 96 app for Apple or Android, or online at blackpower96.org. The theory of African internationalism is a theory of practice. All the energy of the African People's Socialist Party is focused on the destruction of colonial capitalism. Africans of the world, visit our website, apspuhuru.org, and fill out our contact form. And order your copy of Chairman Omali Yeshitela's latest book, Vanguard, The Advanced Attachment of the African Revolution, as well as other works written by Chairman and other party leaders at burningspearmarketplace.com. May 15th to 16th, volunteer with the Black Power Blueprint in St. Louis. Calling volunteers in St. Louis and anyone in the Midwest region available to come to St. Louis. Help beautify the One Africa, One Nation outdoor venue space with African designs. Team coordinators will guide volunteers through the process of preparing surfaces and applying beautiful African designs used by the African People's Education and Defense Fund, APDF, institutions across the country. Sign up by emailing volunteer@blackpowerblueprint.org. And Saturday, May 15th at 6 p.m. Eastern, register for a special web event hosted by the African People's Solidarity Committee, Chairwoman Penny Hess, and featuring special guest Chairman Omali Yeshitela. The event is called Let's Talk About Socialism. What is true socialism and what does it look like? Can there be socialism in one country? And how is reparations to African people related to socialism? Get answers to these questions and submit your own. The African People's Solidarity Committee is the organization of white people created and led by the African People's Socialist Party to build white solidarity with Black power and unity through reparations. Register for this event at tinyurl.com/Let's Talk About Socialism. This year's African Liberation Day, organized by the African People's Socialist Party, will be a 2-day program held virtually May 22nd to 23rd. Our theme is Build the African Worker State, and it's a continuation of our party's trajectory to bring the African nation together under a solitary strategy that will lead to the liberation of our Africa and African people. Register today at alduhuru.org. On Tuesday nights from 9 to 10 p.m. Eastern, join Ralph Pointer on What's Happening Blog Talk Radio. Tune in by calling 347-857-3293. Ralph Pointer sits on the Black is Back Coalition Steering Committee and chairs the BIBC's Political Prisoners Working Group and also leads the Lynn Stewart Committee. And we are calling on people to follow the All African People's Development and Empowerment Project on Facebook or visit developmentforafrica.org for important information and helpful tips in regards to the colonial virus COVID-19. APDEP launched an international telehealth program, a free resource for African people to get our COVID-19 related questions and concerns answered by licensed doctors and nurses through Project Black Ankh. You can make your free virtual appointment with one of their professional health providers by going to developmentforafrica.org/telehealth. Like and follow the Loezi Kinshasa like page on Facebook for more African internationalist political education. Secretary General Loezi Kinshasa does frequent live events such as the War of Ideas series. He includes live sessions done in French. To get alerts of when SG Loezi is going live, make sure to like and follow his page today. And if you're looking for more opportunities for live PE from Chairman Omali Yeshitela, you can tune in every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern on the Chairman Omali Yeshitela Facebook like page and the Burning Spear TV YouTube page, so right where you are, with Chairman's address to the African nation, discussing important topical issues and providing us with an African internationalist analysis. Lastly, to keep up with our movement events, visit theburningspear.com's events page and subscribe to our mailing list. Thank you all for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe to the Burning Spear TV on YouTube to catch every episode of the Omali Taught Me Sunday Study. Uhuru.
Uhuru.